Cassidy Rain Berghoff has felt that way after the loss of her best friend Galen Owen when he died the day after her birthday, and Cynthia Leitich Smith's Rain is not my Indian name. They shared countless memories together, and those memories shaped Rain into the person she is. However, most people in their town of Hannahsburg, Kansas, feels that there is more to the story about how Galen died. In the midst of Rain dealing and coping with the loss of her friend, she finds herself in the middle of a major controversy. Her Aunt Georgia wants to start an Indian camp that focuses on science and technology. However, a majority of the people in the community, especially Mrs. Owen, Galen's mom, thinks that this camp should not be funded with local government money. Rain feels that Mrs. Owen's vendetta against the camp has something to do with their relationship. One day, she decides to confront Mrs. Owen at her house. She wants to get to the bottom of why she feels this way towards her aunt's camp. Let's take a listen to the passage about what they say. Mrs. Owen perched on her famed Louis XIV sofa and gestured for me to join her. "The city council meets in a few hours," she said. I don't want to talk about Indian camp. At least not yet," I told her, surprising myself. Even my run-on mouth usually knows better than to run over a grown-up. From the photographs, Galen's eyes seemed to stare at me from all sides. Galen as a baby, as a toddler, as a little kid. The images looked blankly at me. Then I spotted his most recent school photo. Galen at 13 forever. That did it. Before I could even think about anything else, I had to talk to Mrs. Owen about him. No matter what I told myself on the way over or on the front step, we had to start with Galen. "People are saying you told me I couldn't come to my best friend's funeral." Mrs. Owen moved from the sofa to sit on the bench of her baby grand piano. She turned on the brass pole lamp behind her, and her blonde hair took on a golden hue. "Tell me, Cassidy Rain," she began, "why weren't you there?" "I couldn't," I answered. "I couldn't make myself." I didn't know where Queenie had gotten her information, but in all those messages Mrs. Owen had left me, she never said I wasn't welcome. For a long time, I didn't fully understand why I stayed home, but now it made sense. I hadn't gone to Galen's funeral because that would have made his death seem real, final. I hadn't been ready to deal with that. I didn't want the image of him in a coffin to replace the one of him that night, waving goodbye in the snow. Mrs. Owen reached for her necklace and began twisting it back and forth, a little too hard the last time. It broke. "I'm sorry," she said as the thin chain snaked from her neck. For a moment, she looked like a poor orphan, lost in someone else's mansion. And then she once again became granite and tailored gray. "Cassidy Rain," she said, "do you mean to say you went out with my boy that night without something on your mind?" I hesitated, remembering my itchy lips. Did she know we'd broken her rule? "My son deserved better than that," she announced. "Galen was an honor roll student, polite. He respected his mother." After Pastor Robinson's sermon, Bernadette Ray was whispering to anyone who'd listened that she'd seen you and Galen running around, in the middle of the night. It was awful. People were crying. The pastor's wife warned her to show respect for the dead. Since you hadn't showed up, the story caught on. People are still talking. My son's memory deserves better than that. Yes, I thought. We went street prowling. Yes, Galen ran home instead of getting a ride from Flynn. Now, we weren't supposed to have been doing that. That didn't make us terrible people, did it? Considering what happened, why would anyone care if we'd become more than friends? If somebody spotted us running down the street, how could she have ever known? It felt like I was missing something, but I couldn't imagine what had been so scandalous that it distracted Mrs. Owen from her grief. She must blame me, I thought. Galen and I had been partners in crime that night, but I was the only one who got away. In the way I had it figured, Mrs. Owen was right. I couldn't have done something to prevent Galen's death. I almost started to apologize. It was something I had been wanting to do for a long time. But then I thought about how Mrs. Owen had described Galen, an honor roll student, polite, and his worst fear, a mama's boy. I remembered his golden eyelashes, his tempting freckles, and our birthday pledge. "About Indian camp," I began. "Cassidy Rain," Mrs. Owen said, stating, "perhaps it's time you ran along." Rain realized that the death of her friend shouldn't be left on her conscience. After her conversation, Rain learns more about what it means to honor her friend's memory and not dwell on the past. She spent so long avoiding her friends and community because she lost her partner in crime. To find out more about Rain's story and what she does next, pick up Rain Is Not My Indian Name from your local library.